This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha, one of the fastest growing men's channels on YouTube. And this week we're back with another great video, and you can see the title on your screen. Girlfriend rewards my kindness by hosting, in quotations, her baby daddy in our bed. Ugh. Let's get into this story. Before we do, I wanted to cover the moral of the story. And I picked out 3 points that I want you to watch out for. The first one, women who have children with another man are generally not relationship material. Now, there are always exceptions, and I know I'm going to get some hate mail from some guys out there that are going to say, hey, I married my wife and she already had a kid and we've been together for 35 years and it's been great. Granted, there are exceptions out there, but I'm saying as a general rule, they are not relationship material. Next, in most cases, these women are looking for a nice guy provider for her and for her family. You may think, oh, she's just madly in love with you. And you know what? There could be a level of that. But oftentimes, deep down, the thing she's looking for is stability. And also, of course, pay the bills and take care of her and protect her. Finally, women never truly get over the baby daddy of their children, and some still connect with them whenever the opportunity presents. That's always going to be a risk if you're in a relationship with one of these women. The reason for it, that bond between a woman and the guy who's fathered her children is unbreakable. And it's everlasting. Even if this guy is a total dog, a terrible person, she's still going to have that attraction for that guy deep down inside of her. Now, let's get into today's story. And you can see this dates back to September 17th of 2018. This guy says, looking for some advice here from men who've been in a similar situation. I'm a 29-year-old male and my girlfriend, call her Wendy, is a 26-year-old female. Wendy and I met at the supermarket 3 years ago. It was near closing time on a Sunday, so we were both rushing through the store with shopping baskets, trying to get the items we needed before they threw us out. We locked eyes the first time in the produce department and gave each other a big smile. I saw her again in the bread section. I then ran into her in the cereal aisle and again in the chip aisle. I think she was actually doing it on purpose, as a couple times I saw her walk past in the main aisle. Then when she saw me, she'd come down the aisle I was in. Anyway, we'd smile each time we passed, and on one of the passes, she said, "Oh no, you again." We laughed, I introduced myself, and we talked briefly. I said we better get moving before they kick us out. I noticed she didn't have a ring on, and she was obviously interested in me, so I asked if she'd like to grab a drink sometime. She enthusiastically replied she'd love to. She was beautiful, with a nicely toned body. I thought for sure she'd stiff me and say she wasn't interested, but no, I lucked out. At least that's what I thought at the time. He thought he lucked out, but we're going to find later on that's not the case. Anyway, 2 days later, we met for a drink after work. We clicked and talked mainly about our careers and the companies we work for. Throughout the date, she was sending me strong signals of interest. She was probably batting her eyes and looking at him glaringly, you know, those little subtle signals that the women send to you when they're really interested. I'm a decent looking guy with a good job, but I'm no 10. I think most women would rank me as a 7, maybe a 7.5 in the looks department, while she was a solid 9, maybe even a 9.5. So having this incredibly attractive woman drooling over me during our initial date gave me quite an ego boost. And I said, "That's your first red flag." In this case, he said right up front, "I've got a good job." So that's what I think she saw in this guy. Not so much, "Hey, I'm attracted to him," but he looks like a nice guy. And oh, wow, he does have a good job. I'm going to zero in on him. Not just that, she came across as being very feminine and conservative. Now, I gave that a thumbs up because that's what all the guys on this channel look for in a woman who is feminine and a woman who has conservative values. At least that's what I look for. The following night, I took her out to an expensive steakhouse. The meal cost me quite a bit, but I was trying to impress her, so I didn't mind. Thumbs down on that, mister. Don't blow that kind of money on a first date. You probably spend $150 to $200 depending on the steakhouse. We met at the restaurant and she arrived in a short, low-cut dress wearing high heels. Thumbs up for that. She looked amazing and again sent me strong signals of interest throughout the dinner. We kissed goodbye in the parking lot and she told me she didn't want the night to end. I told her it doesn't have to and invited her back to my apartment. She accepted. She followed me in her car, and within 5 minutes of being inside my apartment, we were in my bed. We spent most of the night going at it in just about every way possible. It was by far, and I mean by far, the best I had ever experienced. And I let her know that. Now, I gave him a thumbs down for that, a big mistake, because again, you're telegraphing to her, "Wow, you're the best thing I ever had. And I just took you to this real expensive restaurant." You're already putting her at the center of your universe. You don't want to do that with women. She said it was the same for her. She stayed the night and we set the alarm early so she had time to go back to her place and get ready for work. I was on cloud nine at this point. We started seeing each other nightly from that point forward. It was on our 6th date when she said there was something she had to tell me. I wasn't sure what she was going to say and was somewhat concerned. She told me that she was the mother of a 3-year-old daughter. A double red flag. Why is she waiting that long to tell you? I was shocked, thinking to myself, why didn't she tell me this before? Well, I can tell you why she didn't tell you before, because she probably knows a lot of guys are going to be turned off by that and are going to turn her down. Then I thought, there's no way her body gave birth to a baby. She had the firmest, tightest body I have ever experienced. She explained that 4 years ago, she was seeing a guy, let's call him Alec. Wendy said they had been dating for about 2 months when they did it unprotected one time and she got pregnant. Just one time, Wendy? I don't buy that. Alec wanted her to keep the baby, but said he wasn't ready to get married as he was unemployed. He told her his plan was to get a job, work for a year, and then after the baby was born, they'd marry. She bought his lies, only to be let down when he bolted less than 30 days after the birth. So this guy's a total dog. Wendy claims that Alec turned out to be a terrible person and described him as a total loser. Another red flag, because here's this hot girl. Why is she falling for a total loser? She said not only does he rarely see his daughter, claiming he'd only seen her 5 to 6 times in 3 years, but has only ever held her twice. At the time, Wendy claimed he hadn't seen her for over 6 months. She also said he'd only paid 16 months of child support owed and was over $19,000 in arrears. Wendy said he's never been able to hold a job for more than 6 months and spends his money drinking, playing poker at the casino, and golfing. She said when he does get a new job, he doesn't start paying support again until she finds out and threatens to take him to court. He then makes a payment or two before either quitting the job or being fired. Wendy explained to me her goal was to get him completely out of their lives, as he has caused nothing but heartbreak and pain. She said her daughter really doesn't even know the guy. From her description, this Alex seemed like a real tool, and I wondered how did someone like her get involved with a guy like him? With her looks, she could easily get any top-notch guy she wanted. After she finished telling her story, I told her I was not expecting this and was a little disappointed she didn't tell me about it before. A little disappointed? I would have been a lot disappointed. She said she didn't for fear I wouldn't date her. I told her we could still date, but I wasn't interested in pursuing a serious relationship with a woman with a child. She seemed saddened by this, but agreed and accepted it. Well, that was okay there, what he told her. He's not interested in a serious relationship, but I'll date you. Now, with myself in a situation like this, with a woman who has a child, I just steer clear of those women. By my doing, we didn't see each other for the next week, but she called and texted me daily, checking in. She finally got me to see her again after she offered to cook me dinner one night as I drove home from an out-of-town business meeting. The food was great, and her apartment was spotless and decorated nicely with a real comfortable, homey feel. It was there I saw pictures of her daughter, call her Chrissy. She was a beautiful little human, and the first thing that came to mind is how could her father not want anything to do with her? If she was my child, I would be so proud. You couldn't pry me away. Some guys are just total losers, I guess. Well, from that night forward, Wendy and I were inseparable again. Big thumbs down, because he was backing off before, saying, hey, I don't want to get involved with this woman with a child. And now he's jumped back in with both feet. I fell deep in love with her, and a week later I met Chrissy, and we hit it off immediately. These girls needed me, and suddenly I pictured myself as one day being Wendy's husband and a father figure to Chrissy. This guy is looking to be the white knight. He sees two damsels in distress. He's going to ride in and swoop them up and fix their lives. You don't do that, guys. These white knights usually end up on the short end of the spear in most of these situations. About 2 years into my relationship with Wendy, I decided to buy my first home. I was doing really well at work and could easily afford it. After 4 months of construction, I moved in. 2 months later, Wendy was about to renew the lease on her apartment, and I took the opportunity to ask her and Chrissy to move in with me. She was overjoyed and quickly accepted. I explained to Wendy that my plan was to live together for a couple of years to see if we were compatible, and then possibly get married. She again was so happy. She actually told me right then that if I do ever ask her to marry me, the answer would be an emphatic yes. She said she wasn't going to pressure me, but she wanted me to know her goal was to be my wife and for us to be a family. Things were going great for Wendy, Chrissy, and I, almost too perfect. We were all so happy, and I thought to myself, this is what family life was all about. Initially, my parents and sisters didn't approve of Wendy, but had grown to like her over time, and now they were all prodding me to pop the question. Don't listen to them. The only one who didn't was my dad, who told me to take my sweet time, because once you make that decision, your life will never be the same. And I gave Pops a big thumbs up there, because he's giving his son good advice. Wendy and I were deep in love, and I became a loving father figure for Chrissy. She and I spent a lot of quality time together, just doing simple things like walking over to the pond to feed the ducks and the fish, or walking out in the woods behind our house and looking for deer, rabbits, and squirrels. I remember once she asked me if I was her daddy now. I explained to her that she already had a daddy, but told her that she and I were best friends. She asked me who her daddy was. Oh man, that's terrible. Which broke my heart. I told her it was Alec. I explained to her we cannot choose who our mom and dad are, but we can choose our friends, and I chose her. She cheerfully told me that she chooses me as well, which brought a tear to my eye. What a little sweetheart, he says. She sounds like a really good kid. For reference, I moved into my house in the middle of December, and Wendy and Chrissy moved in at the end of February. It was now spring, and the golf courses were reopening. My dad and I are avid golfers slash hackers and belong to a Saturday morning league. Our team took the top prize at the first outing, beating the second place group by some 5 strokes. There are a lot of teams in the league, so this was quite an accomplishment for hackers like us. Well, as the winning teams were being announced, I heard the name Alec Blank announced as part of the third place team. He was called up on stage and got a gift certificate to the pro shop along with his fellow teammates. I pointed him out to my dad and told him who he was. Dad replied, "What a POS." It was now our team's turn to take the stage and get our first place trophy and gift certificates. When we did, I noticed Alec was sitting up front. I stared at him and he just looked away. I could tell he knew who I was, and I wanted to make sure he knew I knew who he was. I made a short speech on behalf of our team and challenged the rest of the teams to try again next week if they dare. The rest of the gathering was uneventful, and I went home and spent the rest of the day with Wendy and Chrissy. I almost forgot about seeing Alec, but remembered and casually told Wendy about it. She became enraged. She couldn't believe he had 4 hours to waste golfing and didn't even have 15 minutes to spend with his daughter. I agreed with her and said he was a total a-hole. I thought that would be the end of things, but hearing about Alec really got to Wendy. She wasn't the same cheerful person she normally was. When I asked her, she said, "I am so upset by this." I could understand how she felt, but was kind of puzzled why this was upsetting her so much. After all, he had never played a role in his daughter's life, and she had me now. If she's getting that flustered about you seeing her ex and you're in her life now and she's still all shook up by this guy, that's a major red flag, man. That tells you she's still carrying something for him. Now, maybe it is just anger, but sometimes that anger crosses over into lust and passion. I thought we were our own little family now, and it was great not having him lurking around. I reminded her that she told me she wanted to have him completely out of their lives, and it seems that dream has come true. She smiled and said, "Yes, it has," and gave me a big kiss. The following Saturday morning, I was back at the course doing some putting and chipping before tee-off. I looked at the team rosters and noticed that Alec's name had a line through it, and another man's name written beside it. I thought he must have backed out of playing as he probably feared seeing me. We played and our team came in second. I got home and Wendy was there alone, cleaning house and doing some prep work for dinner that evening. I asked where Chrissy was, and she said she was with her mom. I told her I didn't know her mom was taking her today. She said she didn't plan it, but was talking to her mom and asked if she could take her so that she could get some work done around the house. This was odd, as the house was spotless. But I wrote it off and didn't think anything more of it. Another red flag here, because why did she want the young girl out of the house? To clean the house, which he said was already clean. Suspicion. The following day, we hosted a big picnic for our families in our backyard. I did all the grilling and Wendy prepared all the salads, side dishes, and desserts. I told her we could buy these items at the store, but she insisted on cooking for everyone. The picnic was a success, and everyone had a great time. My mom and sisters were so impressed with Wendy and how hard she worked. My oldest sister pulled me aside and said, "I think she's a keeper. You better put a ring on that, as I don't think you could find a better girl." At that moment, I was so proud of Wendy, proud of her daughter, and proud of myself for having formed a great little family. At this point, I was about as high on emotion as you could possibly get. Normally, when these guys get to the peak emotion, something major happens and deflates their balloon. Stay tuned here, folks. Stay tuned. Now, we're at a point in this story where I want to remind you, if you're liking what you hear, make sure you hit that like button. That will help move this story up on the YouTube algorithm and get it seen all over the world. Now, let's get back to this great story. The week went by, and it was now Saturday again, and my dad and I were back at the course for our golf league. Again, I checked the roster and noticed Alec was not on it. I thought he must have quit the league out of fear of a confrontation with me. We started playing, and then about an hour in, play was suspended due to lightning, and then it poured rain. When I say poured, I mean poured. It rained heavy for 45 minutes straight, and the entire golf course was underwater, as the creek that runs through it had a flash flood. League play was of course canceled for the day, and we all headed home. The interesting thing was this storm was just an isolated cell that set up over that area. Meanwhile, much of the rest of the town just received light rain. I arrived home and everything seemed normal. As I pulled into the garage, I noticed at the end of the cul-de-sac there was a car parked there. We have the only house on the street at this point, and realtors are always showing the available lots, so I didn't think anything of it. As I was turning off the engine, I noticed through the garage window something moving across the property. At first I thought it was a deer, but then I saw it was a man. He was ankle deep in mud and moving as quickly as he could. I saw his face as he glanced over towards the garage, and I could see it was Alec. Oh boy. I immediately ran out of the garage and started yelling at him to stop, calling him by name. He made it down to his car and started pulling around the cul-de-sac. I stood in the middle of the street, knowing this was the only exit, but that coward drove across 2 lots over to the next cul-de-sac and sped away. I knew by his extreme reaction what likely went on between him and Wendy. I went into the house and went directly to our bedroom. There I found Wendy in a t-shirt and shorts, with the bed stripped and laying on the floor. I could tell she was nervous, but tried acting like nothing happened, saying, "You're home early. What happened?" I told her I just saw Alec running from our bedroom door. She acted surprised and said, "What? Are you kidding me?" I told her, "Don't F with me, Wendy. What were you doing?" She kept acting surprised and then confessed that he was just here to talk about Chrissy. I asked her where Chrissy was, and she said she was with her mom. I said, "Just like last week? Is this what you did last week too?" She started crying and said to let her explain. I told her I didn't want to hear it, but wanted to inspect the bed linens she was closely guarding. She asked why, and I told her to not play games and let me see the sheets. She reluctantly did and fell back on the mattress crying. Now listen to this, guys. As soon as I opened the fitted sheet, I saw a fresh, wet spot and the strong smell of body fluids. Ah! I was so angry I just screamed for her to get the F out as loud as I could. She kept crying and trying to apologize, but I told her we are done and just kept screaming, "Get the F out!" She told me that she and Chrissy have nowhere to go and she doesn't want to leave, that we could work this out. I couldn't control my emotions at this point and was getting more heated. That is, until she looked at me with fear in her eyes and said, "You're scaring me." I then thought, "Oh no, woman, you're not going to falsely accuse me of something." So I headed into my office and locked the door. She came outside the door and was just begging me to talk, saying it didn't mean anything and would never happen again. She told me some BS story that Alec was at a low point in his life and was thinking of ending it all. She said he lost his job and was broke and started drinking himself to death. She said he wanted to reestablish a relationship with Chrissy, but didn't know how, and that's why they met for the last 2 Saturdays while I was golfing. She said she temporarily lost her mind today and things got out of hand. Oh my gosh, the excuses they come up with. From there, she just kept saying that I was the love of her life and she wanted to be my wife, have my kids, and spend eternity with me. All of which were lies, of course. All I knew is I wanted to be done with her, but knew legally I couldn't just throw her out without giving proper notice. I also didn't want to spend one more waking minute with her, especially not alone, where she could accuse me of something. So I did what we all do in these situations. I called my parents. I called my dad's phone and he answered on speakerphone from his car. He and mom were coming home from shopping and I told them what happened. They were shocked and saddened and my dad said, "See why I wanted you to take your time?" I told them of my predicament and my mom came up with a great idea. She suggested that since I have to give Wendy a notice, I could stay at their home and they would stay at mine. That way, I would no longer have to see Wendy and they could make sure she doesn't damage anything on the way out. My dad agreed and said he'd be happy to do it just to get her reaction. So old dad is saying, yeah, let's stick it to her here. He went on to say, I bet she moves out within a week. We put the plan in motion and I went into the bedroom to pack a couple bags. During this time, Wendy was begging me to not leave and said she would do anything I wanted. I just ignored her and told her I'd be staying at my parents' and left. She called and texted me for the next 2 hours. I ate dinner with my parents and now it was time for them to head over to my house. They each had a bag and left for my place, just a short 15-minute drive away. After they got there, my dad called me and said you should have seen the look on Wendy's face when he told her they'd be staying there until she vacates. Dad advised her I would be giving her an eviction notice on Monday and that he and mom would be living in the house until the end of the notice period. Dad said he thinks she probably crapped her pants. He said she apologized to them and said she didn't mean to hurt me and hoped I would forgive her. My dad said he and my mom told her that's my decision, but they hope I do not forgive her. With that, she started crying and went into the bedroom and started packing. She then went into Chrissy's room and packed some of her clothes. After an hour or so, my dad called me whispering, saying, "The vulture is leaving the nest." I asked him, "What?" He said, "She's packing and loading stuff into her car." He said they asked if they could help, and she said no, she's got it. He then called me back 20 minutes later and said she's gone off to her mother's house and said she'd be back to get the rest of her stuff later. So their plan worked beautifully. Right after I hung up, I got a call from Wendy and I answered. She again apologized and said she wants to be with me forever, but knows she did something horrible. She said I don't need to stay at my parents' house to avoid her, as she's moving in with her mom temporarily until we can work things out. I didn't want to upset the apple cart at this point, so I just said, okay, we'll talk later. I then went back to my house and my dad and mom greeted me with sinister grins. They're just loving what they did. Their plan worked almost perfectly. My mom suggested that while we're at it, why don't we move all of her stuff out to the garage so she doesn't need to come back into the house. So the three of us began moving all of her possessions into the garage. We started with Wendy's stuff and then went to Chrissy's room. After what Wendy did to me, it gave me pleasure moving all of her stuff out. But when I went into Chrissy's room, I lost it. It broke my heart taking all the furniture and other stuff I bought her out of my house. While she was not my child, I love her like she is mine. and I know she loves me the same. This breakup is going to be devastating on her, and admittedly on me too. While I quickly lost all feelings for Wendy, I do care deeply for little Chrissy. That's why I'm on here at 4:30 a.m. spilling my guts to all of you. How can I best handle things with Chrissy? I don't want to just abandon her after being such a major part of her life for the past 2 years, but I'm not her father. And after yesterday, I will no longer have anything to do with her mother. All feedback is welcome, but I'd really like to hear from men who have been in my position. I know some of you are just going to say, she's not your kid, just move on. But I can't do that. She's very special to me, and I want to do everything to minimize the impact on her. Thanks for reading this and for any responses you send. Signed, One Duped Guy. And now for a few responses from the community, and I always try to pull out some of the better ones. The first one is from a woman. She says, "What happened to you is awful, but it's not as uncommon as you think. I got divorced from my first husband after 6 years and 2 kids together. I then married a great man, but kept a physical relationship with my first husband for a year out of pity." Can you imagine that? So she was doing both dudes. "My current husband found out, but stayed with me. Oh, Mr. Simp, Mr. Simp. We've been happily married for 29 years now, so it can work if you try. Don't listen to this woman." And now a response from a guy. He says, "You sound like a solid man, and I can appreciate your concern for the little girl. However, you've got to remember you are not her father. What I would recommend is that you and your ex sit down with her and have an age-appropriate conversation to explain what's going on. Let her know it's not her fault and you care deeply and will always be just a phone call away." I think that's a good way to handle it. Sit down with her, have, as he describes it, an age-appropriate conversation, just so she knows, hey, it's not her fault and that you really do care about her, and that if she ever does need you, needs to talk, she can just pick up the phone and call you. I think that's a good way to handle this. The next response is from a guy as well. He says, "Bro, I feel you, man. I was in your shoes 6 years ago. My lady didn't sleep with her ex, but stepped out on me with a stranger after 4 years together and raising her 3 kids. Oh man, what were you doing? What were you thinking, mister? 3 kids?" He says he ditched her immediately and the kids were really upset as they love me more than their mom. I've stayed in their lives over the years, but from a distance. You see how you get attached to the kids? We still talk on the phone a few times a month, and I send them birthday and Christmas presents. I'm happily married now with 2 kids of my own, but those kids to this day still call me Pop Pop, and my current wife doesn't mind. Let me say this, getting involved with a woman with kids is complicated, and I don't recommend it as you'll end up with a broken heart. So good advice from a guy who's been through it. And the final response is from a woman. She says, "It's going to be tough, but you've got to move on without Wendy and Chrissy. There's no way you can have a relationship with Chrissy when you and her mom are no longer together." I agree with that. I'd meet with Chrissy and explain what's going on, tell her you love her, and let her know that you'll be there if she ever needs to talk. She'll be okay. Kids are more resilient than you think. And that's very good advice, very similar to what that one guy had given as well. And now for the final update. We're going to find out how this thing all turns out. And this is from February 9th of 2019, nearly 5 months later. He says, "Hello, folks. I've gotten many requests for an update, so I wanted to come back on here to let everyone know what transpired since my original post. First of all, I did not get back with Wendy. Good job. Even though she tried begging me daily for nearly 5 weeks after D-Day. She even had the nerve to have Alec call and leave me a message." Now, I had another story where a woman did that. She actually had her lover call her husband and try to explain things. What is going through their head? Thinking that that's going to work. Oh boy. She really has a very low opinion of this guy, as you can tell, if she thinks that he was going to buy that story. In the message, he apologized, saying it was all his fault and that he manipulated Wendy into bed. In his own words, he called himself a scum and said, I have nothing to worry about. He said he wouldn't come near Wendy or Chrissy again and was willing to sign away his parental rights. Man, what a lowlife. I, of course, didn't call this stooge back, and his message only further supported my decision to boot Wendy. Now for the tough part. After realizing I wasn't going to forgive her and that we would not be getting back together, Wendy agreed to a meeting between she, Chrissy, and I to explain to Chrissy what was going on. We met at Wendy's mom's and we had the talk. To my surprise, Chrissy took things well. She was near tears several times, but I was able to stave that off, giving her encouragement. The meeting happened back in October, and since that time, she's called me to talk about a half dozen times. She's also sent me pictures she's taken of different animals she's seen in the park near her new apartment where she and her mom live now. So this turned out okay, I guess. My ex, on the other hand, is still a wreck. According to her mother, she talks about me every day and is full of regret. Of course she's full of regret. She had a high-value guy with a good job and a brand new house, and this guy loved her kid. She had everything going for her, and she gave it up for what? She accepts now I'm not coming back and blames herself for everything that's happened. Well, she should blame herself because it's 100% her fault. According to her mom, Wendy just goes to and from work and spends time with her daughter. Well, she's a single mother, so that's what she should be doing. Going to work and then coming home and taking care of her kid. As for me, I'm out of the dating scene for now, but plan to dip my toes back in the water soon. Be careful, mister. Don't worry, though, I will not be dating any women with children ever again. Signed, One Duped Dude. So that's the story. I thought it was a great story. Now, he made a lot of mistakes right up front. You know, he made her the center of his universe, spending all kinds of money on her, telling her she was the greatest, moving her into the house, really falling deeply in love with this woman. But I have to hand it to him. Once he found out she had cheated, man, he totally cut her off. And I love that plan that his mother came up with and went over there to his house. And pretty much she ended up leaving right away. So their plan worked out great. So I got to tip my hat to the mom and dad. They did a great job. So those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story? Have you ever been in a relationship with a woman who had children? How did that work out for you? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And I will talk to you on the